Welcome. I am so happy you're here. This is my first ever video, and I am so excited to take you along the journey. I'm Emily. I am a women's health and fitness coach. I have lost over 100 pounds along my journey, and I'm officially in competition prep for bikini competition later this year. This video today is just going to be all about you getting to know me, understanding, who I am, where I came from, what my goals and dreams are, and yeah, just kind of warming up together. So let's get into it. So the start of my bodybuilding journey, as I guess you could say, fitness journey, whatever you want to call it, I've got a long history here. So I was always an athlete growing up. I was always in various sports. I was always someone who was super, super active and loved being an athlete. My sports were always, I played tennis for 15 years, and then I ran cross country and track all through high school. I loved it. I loved the team energy, but also, for both of those sports, it was still very much on you as an individual to succeed. And I loved that. I loved the drive. I loved the push. I ended up getting injured end of my junior year of high school. Ended up getting really sick and didn't end up pursuing running in college like I had initially planned to, which really kind of threw off my identity. Since I had been an athlete my entire life, I had always identified as an athlete. I always had a coach telling me what to do, how to stay in shape, exactly what to do every single day. End up going to college, and just like a lot of people who are no longer athletes when they get to college, you also aren't living with your parents anymore and telling you, how to eat, how to take care of yourself. It's very much all on you. And I did probably well with it, for the first year or two. And then I got into a relationship that was super unhealthy, and I turned to food and drinking to cope. It was sources of comfort for me, and kind of along through, that phase of my life, I ended up gaining a lot of weight and just feeling very lost. Didn't know who I was at the time of the breakup. My grandma had also passed away. She had been huge influence and supporter in my life. She was my number one fan. So losing both of those people at the same time catapulted me into a season of life where I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted in life. I didn't know who I wanted to be. And in feeling so lost, continued to turn to food and alcohol as sources of comfort for myself. I was able to just kind of hide the pain by pretending that it wasn't there and masking it with things that did bring me comfort, no matter how unhealthy that was. So flash forward, we're 2019, and I am doing everything under the sun to try and lose weight. I, did Beachbody. I did all the things, and I felt like every few months I was just in this cycle of this extreme, attempt at losing weight, and ended up in that vicious cycle that I see so many women going through, where, you go to an extreme and then you just go back in this circle because it's not sustainable and it doesn't last. And I didn't understand why. It just made me feel like a failure. So end of 2019, I met my now husband. We started dating, and it was refreshing. It was healthy. I spent a year and a half at that point completely single, just trying to figure myself out, figure out what I needed, what I even wanted, who I even was. And finally was in a place where I had a healthy environment. I had a healthy partner. I had that support where I felt like I could kind of push myself and challenge myself without this like immense fear of failure, because I knew that no matter what, I had this person that was there to support me and loved me. And so the serious part of my like weight loss journey started at the end of 2019. I did a Whole30. While I do not recommend it to clients or really anyone, and I have learned so much since then, I am still very thankful to my experience while doing Whole30, because it did kickstart what ended up becoming my entire career. I was spinning my wheels. I was trying everything that I possibly could to lose the weight. At that point, I was about 250 pounds, so severely overweight and very unhealthy. I had a wake-up call where I realized that my grandma had passed away from complications from diabetes. And I had this moment where, I had this amazing person that I had met. We, wanted to build a family together and build this life together. And I realized that if I continued down the path that I was on, I would not have long term. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't, get to be 85 years old and meeting my grandkids. That was just the sad reality. And I wanted to be able to do stuff with my partner. I wanted to be able to go enjoy hobbies together and spend time outside and be active. And so it was kind of this like kick in the butt to just get the ball rolling on things that I knew I needed to change. So I did Whole30, and it was one of the experiences of all time. I will not give it a lot of credit for being a sustainable, method for weight loss. However, I will say it did, like I said, it did push me to what ended up becoming my career. I decided after I finished Whole30 that, obviously it was not sustainable. It wasn't something that I could continue long term, but it was something that started laying the groundwork for me to understand a little bit more about nutrition. And it showed me how good it feels to eat, a mainly whole foods diet. And so from there, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I want to learn as much as I can about nutrition as possible. So I ended up actually getting certified as a nutrition coach through NASM just for my own education. I just wanted to know as much as I could. I wanted to learn about nutrition. I wanted to learn about how food worked for the human body. And then it just went from there. I fell in love with nutrition. I fell in love with learning all about food and the body and the way that we can use food as fuel instead of as a means to starve ourselves. And it just went from there. So I ended up then pursuing a personal trainer cert, and it was kind of amazing because at the same time that I was pursuing that, we were moving to Alaska. So I kind of got to have this like career shift as we were moving. And I got to Alaska, finished my certification, and reached out to a local gym owner and was just like, hey, I'm a brand new personal trainer. I, am hoping to make this my career. However, I don't know how to coach people. I have the education, I have the knowledge, I passed the test, but I don't know what to do with this. And he was just like, heck yeah, come on in. Let's, set up some sort of like mentorship shadowing thing. And ended up shadowing him for about 6 months. He offered me a position as a trainer at his gym, which was amazing. It was like 5 minutes down the road from my house. So it was super convenient. And I loved it. And that kind of propelled me forward into, my career now. My husband was in the Army. And so it was something that I was looking at as kind of as the, online coaching was really taking off. I was like, wow, I think I want to pursue online coaching because it's mobile. It's something that I can take with me whenever we move. At the time, he was looking at staying in longer. And so it was perfect to me. I was like, this is great. So all of it to say, started really focusing on the online side of coaching. Business took off and ended up becoming my full-time career. On the weight loss side of things, I was thriving. I felt strong. I felt confident in my body. I was, going to the gym for the first time. I was never a gym person because I was always either playing tennis or running. The gym was never something that I grew up around. Neither of my parents are big gym goers. So I didn't really have that influence around me. So my first taste of the gym was Planet Fitness in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which was interesting. It was fun. It got me into the gym, and I was so fortunate that when we moved to Alaska, I had access to world-class gyms on base and was able to really actually start exploring weightlifting and just actually being in a full service gym. And I found love, and it was amazing. It was everything that I needed and everything that I wished I had had sooner, but I don't knock myself for the time that it took me to get there. So, we're in 2022 at this point. I am thriving. I'm feeling strong. My husband and I are hiking. We're super active in Alaska. Go backpacking. We went on this beautiful backpacking trip with a couple of our friends, and it was probably one of my favorite core memories that I have with both my husband and those friends. Memories that I know I will cherish forever. And I remember loving how strong I felt. And sure, I wasn't out there, racing or anything like that, but I remember being out there and just feeling proud because the body that I had been in so many years prior, I never would have been able to do that. That's just the reality. So it was the goal that I had when I first started trying to lose weight in 2019 to be able to be active outdoors with my husband. I was finally seeing come to fruition, and it was so exciting. And I was just so proud of that. So we get back from the backpacking trip, and I still get choked up when I talk about this. Was in the gym just a day or two after we got back and was warming up to do squats. I had no weight on the bar at all whatsoever. This was a movement that I had been doing for several years at this point. I was very meticulous about form. Was warming up, no weight on the bar, literally 2 reps into a warm-up set, and got down into the bottom of the rep, and my entire back seized up. I felt this giant pop, the worst pain that I've ever felt in my entire life. I failed out of it with just the bar, which was humiliating, and then was glued to the gym floor for about 15 minutes. Back was totally frozen. I could not move. I was in so much pain that I couldn't even speak. And I just sat there, and eventually everything kind of loosened up, and I was able to stand up, hobbled my way out of the gym, went home, and was completely immobile for probably 2 or 3 weeks at that point. It was miserable. We had a brand new puppy that I had to take care of. My husband was gone. And it was awful. And that was the moment that so much of my life changed. I battled crappy healthcare from the military for a year and a half and did physical therapy for about 9 months. Nothing was helping. I could hardly move without pain. I was just living in chronic pain, which if you've ever experienced that, one, I'm so sorry and I feel for you. And two, it leads to the worst bottomless pit of depression that you could ever experience. And so I spent a year and a half, kind of going back and forth with doctors and health insurance and all the things, trying to find a solution. I tried the steroid injections, tried physical therapy. I tried everything that I could from a holistic standpoint. And then my neurosurgeon who had done the steroid injections was basically just like, we have kind of exhausted all of our options. The only thing left to try is surgery. I had tried so hard up until that point to not have to do surgery. Obviously so it was 2023. So I was 26 at this point. At 26 years old, the last thing that you want is to be told that you have to have spinal surgery, especially in a case where it was a crapshoot. It could have helped, or it could have just been another thing that we tried and it didn't change anything. And then on top of that, I'm also on a, nasty recovery from spinal surgery. But it was a risk that I was willing to take. I was willing to kind of gamble and basically just like hoped and prayed that it would work, and it would be the solution that I had always been kind of looking for. And so February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2023, shout out to my angel saint of a husband for taking care of me on Valentine's Day. I went in and I had 4 herniated discs, basically L5-S1 up, and they ended up having to remove a bunch of tissue. I had shards that had broken off and were floating. They had to expand the nerve canal through my spine. It was quite an experience, and recovery was awful. It was brutal. It was a very, very long road to recovery. But it worked. And I am, I was, for the most part, pain-free almost immediately. I remember waking up from surgery, or waking up the next day and feeling so overwhelmed to the point of tears, because it was the first time in a year and a half that I wasn't waking up in excruciating pain. I had the discomfort from the surgery, but I was waking up not feeling my back for the first time in a year and a half, and it was life-changing and the best feeling ever. And like I said, I had a long road to recovery after that, but I recovered, and I am now fully in the gym and lifting, and it saved me in a lot of ways. The surgery that I was worried about having saved me. So shout out to Dr. Brian Miller in Anchorage, Alaska. If anyone is in Alaska and needs spinal surgery, Dr. Brian Miller is a godsend. So fast forward, it's like June 2023. I'm probably 4 months post-op at this point, fully back into lifting, totally cleared for everything. And my best friend and I at the time were doing these like weekly just hangouts. She has a little girl, so we would go to McDonald's and get Diet Cokes while her daughter played on the play place. But I remember sitting at one of these like Donnie's dates that we would do and sharing with her kind of on a whim. It was terrifying to me. So at the time she was still competing in bikini, and we were talking about, the competitions that she's done and stuff like that. And I just had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to share this with her. And it was something I never shared with anyone before. It was terrifying to talk about. But I had this dream since probably early days of college, where there was a girl that I knew who was competing. And I just remember thinking it was so cool, and what a powerful statement. And it was something that I wanted to do so bad, but I never felt like I could do it because I'd never been a gym person before. I didn't understand the gym. I didn't understand weightlifting. I still, was operating under the idea that weightlifting makes you bulky if you're a woman. And so it was something that I never pursued. And then I gained a lot of weight. And I looked around at, people living the bodybuilding lifestyle and competing. And I didn't feel like I saw anyone who started out looking like me. I didn't know, obviously you don't know everyone's story, but just looking at competitors, it was really easy for me to fall into this really like limiting mindset of, I don't know that anyone else has lost, over 100 pounds before they even start prep. I don't think I'm cut out for this. I don't think that I deserve a spot to do this. I don't think that I deserve a spot on stage because I'm fat. And my mindset for so long was just like, I'm fat, so I can't. It was never, I'm overweight, but I could work really hard and get there. It was just like, that could never be me. That's great for someone else. That's someone else's dream. Even though it's my dream too, that could still never be me. And this particular friend of mine was my safe space through so much. And I remember sitting there and just being like, I'm just gonna tell her. I'm gonna share my dream with her. And I just kind of blurted it out and was just like, I think I want to compete one day. And she immediately got the biggest smile on her face and was just like, hell yeah, let's do it. Like, say less. Let's get you there. And that was a very defining moment for me because it was the first time in a really long time outside of my husband that I had shared a big, scary dream goal with someone and was met with just unconditional enthusiasm and support. And it was in that moment that I was just like, holy crap, I just said that out loud. And she actually like didn't laugh in my face. Like, she said that I could do it. And I think that was really all that I ever needed to hear. It was just, I needed to hear from someone, you can do that. Yeah, of course. Like, you can put in the work and you can do that too. And so that was that. And she was working as a coach at the time. And a couple of days later, we were talking and she and I agreed that she would help me get there. She was going to be my coach. So joined her team. I was on under her on Team USA Physique and just had a blast. I had so much fun. We worked together for about a year before we realized that the best friend coach relationship is kind of a tricky balance to strike. And we wanted to maintain our friendship more than anything. And it was better to kind of have those separate. So parted ways as coach and client, which I never felt any negativity about. She's still my absolute best friend. I love her to pieces. She's my biggest fan. She gets weekly updates and it's so much fun. So when I first started with her, went into it with the mindset of, I know I have a lot more weight to lose than the average bodybuilder. And because of that, I wanted to do it in the healthiest way possible. And my mindset going into this new chapter of my life was, I will just work for however long it takes. If it takes a year, if it takes 2, if it takes 3, for me to finally get to a place where I can healthily go into a prep, that's just however long it takes then. And I will just work until I get there. And I felt like a fraud. I felt like such a fraud when I first started. And I would share with people that I was working to eventually do prep to compete in bikini because I didn't look like a bodybuilder. I didn't have the background that, a bodybuilder does. I just knew that I had a lot of work ahead of me and I was willing to spend as long as it took to get there. And I had many days that I cried because I had the drive and I had the ambition and I had the dream of, any other bodybuilder out there, but I didn't look like one. So it was hard for me. It was hard for me to take myself seriously, but I also didn't feel like anyone else was going to take me seriously. And I'm just so thankful that I powered through and got through all of those negative feelings that I was having and the imposter syndrome, and allowed myself to recognize that I did deserve to be there and I did deserve to, eventually step on a stage with everyone else. Just because I started from a much bigger place than they didn't make me any less deserving to be there and to be competing alongside them. And, if anything, it's a huge testament to my work ethic, because at this point, the start of my prep, I've already lost over 100 pounds. I'm 110 pounds down from the heaviest that I've ever been. And I did that all completely natural on my own and, committed to the long haul. I knew that this was something that I wanted to do. And so for me, it was worth however long it took to get there. So here I am now. I've been with my new coach, Mike White from Great Matter Training, for about a little over 3.5 months now. And it has been the best experience. I am so excited. I got the text from him yesterday that prep is a go. So we are just full bore now until later this year. I am not sure how much I want to share publicly as far as like shows, show dates, things like that. I think that for myself, I kind of want to keep that to myself for now. Maybe that's something that I will share down the road, but later this year, the stage will be there for me, and I'm so excited. This has been, like I said, a dream of mine for years at this point, and just really excited. I'm excited to take you guys along, along the journey. One of my biggest goals with the content that I'm going to put out throughout this prep is to show everyone watching that they can do, the hard things can be done. And, to hopefully show someone who might be in the shoes that I was in a few years ago that it is doable, and you deserve to do it too, and you deserve to chase your dreams, even if they're big and scary, even if they look different. The journey together looks different than it would for someone else. I want to be that example to other women that it doesn't matter where you're starting, as long as you don't stop and you just keep going, it can be done. And just be that representation that I didn't have of, what that journey can look like. So it's been far from perfect. There's been a lot of, bumps along the way, but I'm proud to be here. And I am just so ecstatic to be taking you guys along for the ride. So stay tuned.